not the entire story. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, Magi, or wise men, from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? We observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage," or another way to say this, to worship him. When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes and people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told Herod, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men of Magi and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and worship him." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and worshipped him. Then opening the treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. Now after they had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt. Remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." And Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night, and went to Egypt, remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the Magi, or wise men, he was infuriated. He sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had learned from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing in loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they are no more. When Herod died, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who are seeking the child's life are dead." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. When he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And after being warned in a dream, he went away to the district of Galilee. There he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled, for he was called a Nazarene. So this morning, on January 6th, we are in this new year 2019, and the good news is that there are 359 more days yet to dawn before we reach perfect vision of 2020. And so I thought it was appropriate today, on this first Sunday of this new year, to share a message that I hope will encourage you, I hope will invite you and implore you to this year, 2019, to live in a way where you and I rise above, where we rise above the world in which we live today, that we rise above and live in a different way in this day we live in now of such deeply divided partisan politics. How, for some reason, we're not able to see our shared humanity and the presence of the divinity in all because all of us are children of God. How do we rise above? Rise above the fear-mongering and finger-point. Rise above the way that certain communities are treated. How do we rise above? Rise above to indeed be those who follow Jesus in a way that he called us to live, to rise above any backbiting or backstabbing that occurs amongst human beings, to rise above the ways that so many will call us to live. I mean, oftentimes when someone does wrong to you, it's so much easier to just return the same to them. And I have to admit, in that moment, it sure feels good.
Amen.
But there's a problem. The problem is now we still have not found a better way. We still have not found a way for us again to be together as God's children. The idea of eye for eye, tooth for tooth was an old paradigm. Jesus lifted up a new paradigm that said instead of you talking about the speck in your neighbor's eye, take the telephone pole out of yours. Jesus called us to look here for evil dwellers, to look here for sin may exist, instead of first looking at somebody else. So again, this is understanding today of how do we rise above? How do we in journey of faith rise above? Rise above and lift our expectations of what God can do through us and raise our accountability of how we follow Jesus together. How do we begin to rise above? So there was a story that I want to share with you that really touched my heart and in so many ways strengthened me in my own walk with God. A young man who taught us and showed us a way to rise above. I don't know if you're familiar with the story of this young man. His name is Tyler Trent. Tyler Trent. Tyler Trent was born back in September 7th, I believe, 1998. Tyler Trent was the first of 3 children born to his parents there in Indiana. Tyler was a child who they said was wise beyond his years, or as I've heard many elders explain it, it seemed like Tyler had been here before. He had such incredible wisdom and insight as a young child. And Tyler did everything with extraordinary excellence in his life. He was just one of those kids. But Tyler's life changed in the summer of 2014. He had had pain in his arm, his right upper arm, for some time, but he chalked it up to just being some type of irritant, or perhaps, again, still growing at the age of 14, soon to be 15. He thought it was nothing, 50, about to be 60. He thought it was nothing significant. Until one day he was playing with his friends. They were playing a game called Ultimate Frisbee. And Ultimate Frisbee is the combining of frisbee, throwing a frisbee, with football and soccer. And so it's played on a large field. And you throw the disc as far and as hard as you can to the person you want to catch it. And so this summer day, Tyler was playing with his friends, and he had his frisbee, and he threw it as hard as he could. But as his arm threw the frisbee, his right upper bone snapped in 2. When he went to see the doctors and rushed to the hospital, they couldn't understand how someone this young could break his humerus just by throwing a frisbee. And unfortunately, what they found, the doctors diagnosed him with a type of cancer called osteocarcinoma, which is a very rare and aggressive form of cancer that basically eats your bone. He had it. What happened is the doctors had removed his humor bone, his right arm, and replaced it with a titanium rod. And because of this aggressive cancer, they had to put him through a very stringent, arduous chemotherapy treatment plan. And it wiped this young man out. But again, what was amazing about his story is that he still graduated from high school with his class. Also, Tyler Trent received the Presidential Award to attend his dream college of Purdue University because he scored 1,500 on the SAT. 1,600 is perfect. When I took the SAT many years ago, trust and believe, I was nowhere near. Even if you times my score by 2, I don't think I would get 1,500. But that was Tyler Trent. Tyler Trent's story is so inspiring about this young man who again was able to rise above this deadly diagnosis, to rise above, to go to Purdue University, his dream college, living in Indiana, to pursue a career in sports journalism. He was able to rise above the surgery of removing his right arm. He was able to rise above chemotherapy and radiation. And he got the good news that his cancer had gone into remission. So that story today, I hope, is one that speaks to us all. And I think that's really also what Matthew is giving us a glimpse of in today's scripture text. As again, we are called to rise above and to see and be in different ways as we follow God. So we get into Matthew's story. I want to first begin by putting this disclaimer out. It is not my intention to burst your Jesus birth bubble, okay? It's not my intention to mess up your view and vision of Jesus' birth and what happened that night he was born. If you, like me, does anyone here have a creche set or nativity scene in your house? Right? I know we have many in our house. I'm not here to make you look at your creche set and think this thing is not accurate, okay? However, I do think clarity is important. So again, with creche sets and nativity sets, I'm sure if you don't have one, you have seen them before yourself. It may be hard to see this one here, but in our creche sets, of course, you know the cast and crew, the characters that show up, right? In your creche set, we all kind of have the same things. And one thing I want to show you too today is I think it's always relevant. Of course, that is one of the creche sets there that is told from the perspective of Snoopy. Right, and then we have here, this creche set here, and just again take note of who all is present in the scene. But I also want to make sure I include today, this is actually a Mexican nativity set, a Latino one that was made in Mexico. This is a nativity set made here in the United States that has an African-American understanding of nativity. This is a creche set, down. This actually is one from China. This is an Asian, Chinese creche set that is there. And then I also want to include this Native American one as well that has been made and created in some path. I think the reason why I want to show you these different perspectives and cultural understandings of nativity scene and creche set is that it is so important that we're able to see God in ourselves. And it's so important for us to also be able to see God in all people and not just have one version of the nativity scene. Which, again, unfortunately, more often than not, what you find in stores are more often the creche set nativity scenes that have a Eurocentric look to it, right? In other words, everybody is white like the driven snow, except for maybe one of the wise men, right? Would not be so. And again, I'm not here to tell you you shouldn't have a creche set of such, but I am here to challenge and invite you to also have other creche sets as well, or maybe mix them all up together. Because again, the truth is that we should be able to see God in ourselves and in all those who we encounter. Now, someone say, yeah, but I want my creche set to be accurate. Well, if you want it to be accurate, then you shouldn't have a white baby Jesus, because Jesus had more Afro-Asiatic features to him. And in fact, as we read in the story today, when God wanted to hide Jesus, he didn't send Jesus and Mary and Joseph to England, he sent them to Egypt. So Jesus had features that looked more Northern African and not Northern England. Y'all with me? But again, it's so vital we see God in each other and see God in ourselves. Because that's the story of the birth of Christ, how God became us and lived among us. But no doubt, no matter again the cultural context of a nativity scene, a creche set, you will find that who are the characters, who are the people that we have in our nativity scenes. We have, of course, who? Jesus, right? Come on, you can't have this, right? Jesus, the baby Jesus, and laying on the manger, right? Well, they have Woodstock. That's what I use. They really stretch it there, right? So you have Jesus, the baby Jesus, in the manger. Who else is there? Mary, right? You always have Mary there. And then you have who? Joseph, right? And Joseph often is the one holding a light, a lantern, right? About the light that is shining forth. So you have Mary and Joseph, and then you also have who? You have the wise men, right? There they are right there. 1, 2, 3. One over here actually to the left, and two, one nearly, and one there. And then you also have who? Shepherds, right? Shepherds and sheep. And sometimes you're seen may actually have an angel. I think Snoopy one. There's a little Sally down there at the bottom. She's an angel right there. So you have the angels, the shepherds, the wise men, Jesus, and Mary, and Joseph. But here is the problem. Here's where I just want us to have an understanding today as we look at these two stories. Because what has happened in our nativity scenes, in our creche sets, we have taken two completely different accounts of the birth of Jesus, and we have compartmentalized it, we have sanitized it, we have harmonized it, and said, here is what happened. But in truth, that is not how it happened. Because actually, if you read the stories, and we read this together on Christmas Eve, if you start Luke, the Gospel of Luke tells us, it's Luke's story where we encounter these different characters. It's in Luke's story where we have a decree that goes out from Emperor Augustus. It's in Luke's Gospel where Joseph goes from Nazareth to the town of Bethlehem. It's in Luke's Gospel where Mary is engaged and she's ready to have a child, and then it says she gave birth. So Luke's Gospel is actually present in the birth moment and talks how she had her firstborn son wrapped in a bands of cloth and what? Laid him in the manger. And it's Luke's story that we told that there were shepherds keeping watch over their flock by night. They were in nearby fields around the region, and the angels go and announce to the shepherds that this child has been born. So it's Luke's Gospel that has angels, and Luke's Gospel has shepherds, and Luke's Gospel has the manger and this place in Bethlehem where Jesus is actually born. So that's Luke. And part of why the gospel writer Luke is writing this is what I hope we can understand today, that what Luke was especially trying to stress to us is that we get to understand how God, who sits or reigns so high, got so low. How the God who created in the very beginning, created all with God speaking in 7 days, or created with God's hands. In the second account of creation, the God who separated the waters of the Red Sea, the God who protected Daniel in the lion's den, the God who gave the 10 Commandments, the God who yields such power and possibility and potential, the God who has such things, became flesh. God got low. What's the song that says, how low can you go? God got low. And Luke is showing us how God got low. God got low. In fact, God got so low that God, the Christ child, God in the flesh, was born in a manger. Even actually, if you look at the story itself, it never says he was born in a stable. But it says he was placed in a manger. And a manger is a feeding trough for animals. And so we know he was born in a place where animals would feed. It could have been a cave. It could have been somewhere without any shelter. But he was born and placed. How low can you go when you're born and placed in the place, a dog dish? You're placed where the animals eat. How much more does God have to humble God's self to show us the extravagance of God's love and grace, that God would enter in this world in this way? How low did God go? God got so low that God let shepherds who were homeless, again, and penniless, living out of it. God let the lowly shepherds know that guess what? Something just happened. It wasn't announced to kings or emperors or pastors and bishops. It was announced to those living under the overpass that you and I go by every day. They were the ones that found out. Because God got so low. God got so low that God's grace would be poured out in such a way. God got so low. God got low that we might be lifted. That's Luke's story. Luke celebrates how God got low. But Matthew emphasizes something different. And that's why, again, it's important to look at these stories in different ways. Because Matthew, as we read today, tells us about this King Herod, who, after Jesus was born, wise men, and actually, let me just pause there again. Touch your neighbor and say, he's not messing it up on purpose. Okay? I promise, I'm not. Don't go home, throw out the press sets, or go around telling me that's just wrong. No, it's not dangerous, but there's some things we miss when we do it. First of all, you all ready? They were not kings. In fact, even us saying wise men, I hope we don't confuse with wise guys. Like, they actually, in the word there, the Greek word that's used there for us to see is magi. It's actually where we get our word magic from, or magician. Comes from this understanding, magi. Magi is the plural, okay? They were magi, and magi, actually when that word has been used in other places of writings of that time, it's actually speaking about a group of people who were called Zoroastrians. Zoroastrians were in essence astrologers. They were, now astrologers, not astronomers like we have in NASA, astrologers. You know, who read the stars and the signs. You know, when you open the paper and you go to that one page and say, well, I'm going to have a good day today, because it says, right, my horoscope, right? That's what they were. They were Zoroastrians. They were priests of a different, this is important, priests of a different religion and culture, who saw the star of the Jewish king and would travel to it. And actually, the Jewish priests and scribes missed the sign, which is part of a warning for us in church, because we think we got God all figured out. And we think we got all the answers for everybody here. We have to respect the mystery of God and let God be God. And sometimes, since we think we have all the answers, we don't miss what God is doing. Because God's own people missed that God was right here. Did you notice the star? They didn't see the star, or they didn't know what they were seeing. But these Zoroastrians are the ones who see it, and they travel. The Magi. But the other thing, they're not kings. Nowhere to say they're wealthy. They're priests of a different faith. But also, I want to point this out. Nowhere, just get ready, because it just messes everything up. But nowhere does it say, well, I'll put it this way. There are three stooges. Larry, Curly, and Moe. Shemp does not count. There are three amigos. Remember the movie? Steve Martin, Chevy Chase, Martin Short. Right? There were three people in Three's Company. Jack, Janet, Chris, right? In baseball, there's 3 strikes and you're out. If the Ravens win the Super Bowl, it'll be their 3rd Super Bowl, right? But nowhere does it say that there were 3 wise men. All we know is there was more than one. Now they brought 3 gifts. That's why we also think there were 3 of them, because 3 gifts were given. But also those gifts were so costly that maybe there was 20 of them. And they all chip in, say goodbye to these gifts. We have made it that. And again, don't go home and throw one of your wise men out and go find another one that had. I mean, it's not that serious. But it's just understanding some things about the story that we have just assumed is what it is. In fact, the church even named these 3 wise men. One was Melchior, Caspar, and Balthazar. But that's not Scripture. It's not really fundamental to Matthew. It's not spoken about. Also, just notice this today. Jesus is not a newborn. Jesus is a child. And he's actually living in a house. He's not in a stable. He's not in a manger. He's probably about 2 years old at this point. And Jesus was in the terrible twos, right? I was thinking it's so unfair to tell kids. I heard someone say to child, you better act more like baby Jesus. Well, you think baby Jesus wasn't a baby? Right? He was human. So of course he was a baby as a child. And he's a child here. He's not a newborn. He is now a child that they come to see in Bethlehem. And again, just understand the star does not appear in Luke's gospel. The star is only in Matthew's. And Jesus is here and they're coming to worship. And part of what to understand as well today is if you think about it today, I want you to consider, we do know that we know Jesus is older, so it may have taken these magi years to get there. It could have, they may have left later if they saw it, but no matter what, we know that they came from a long distance. They traveled over some tough terrain. They probably had to go through some desert-like climate conditions. They may have gone through some very desolate and deep valleys. They probably went through some dangerous highways and byways. They had to navigate, and they went through all of these things so they might worship the newborn king. But what are we willing to go through to worship? It doesn't take much to stop us. It takes sometimes not even an inch of snow. It takes the forecast of snow. I'm just not going, right? What are we willing to go through to worship? Because things may not be going right in life right now. And I love when someone says to me, once I get my life in order, I will be there in church. And I'm like, you know what? If I waited until I got my life in order, I wouldn't be here today. That's why I'm here. So what are we going to go through to worship? And then what does our worship look like when we gather here to worship God? What does it look like? Is there any extravagance in our expression of our worship and thankfulness to God today? Because truly what the wise men bring, and this is also then important to Matthew, is they brought these 3 gifts: gold, frankincense, not Frankenstein, right? And myrrh. The gold was representative of his royalty, his kingship, that Luke talked more about his humanity. Matthew's going to talk more about his royalty. And then the frankincense is about divinity. It's an aroma, a perfume that fills the room. And then finally, myrrh is actually referencing his upcoming death, as myrrh is used for embalming. So gold, frankincense, and myrrh, again, are these symbols that are brought to him, and it cost them a great deal to travel and to give and to buy and provide. So what are we doing with our worship? And how much of ourselves are willing to give back to God? Luke, just to close today then, for us to see what Matthew's doing, from what I understand, as we talked about, Luke is showing us how low God would go for us. Matthew then is challenging us for us to be the ones that to raise up or lift up the name of God. God got low that we might sit up, stand up, lift our voices up, live up in a way to say, look at what God has done. Luke got low. Matthew says, lift him high. Lift the name of Jesus. Lift what God has done so all might know and see. Luke and Matthew. But I can't sit down today though without just going one more place with you. Because there's another part of the story, of course, that is so difficult for us to understand and comprehend. How we're called to rise up, to rise above, despite what the world might bring. Because see, in this story, after verse 12, it gets ugly. Because we're told what Herod does. Herod, who was again threatened by this new king, often those in power are threatened by the gospel because the gospel speaks a different message than the world does. Herod, when he saw this trick, he sent and killed all the babies. He killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under. Beginning of Matthew is just, again, so uplifting and poetic. Brings a sense of peace and tranquility to me. Then you go a little further, and then you hear this. You hear what happened. You hear that not everybody is enthused that God became flesh. Now everybody is enthused about a new kingdom that God reigns over. A kingdom not based on fear and might, but based on love and peace. And it's funny because some of my colleagues who I talk with and meet with and we plan our sermons, they told me, well, we're just not going to read those passages. That's what they said. They said, we're going to stop at verse 12. We're not even going to get into all these other things that happen because it's too upsetting. But the difficulty with that is that if we only present the life of faith that is something so easy and something so constantly peaceful and so tranquil, life of faith being something that always has you lifted up, we only give you half of the picture. Because the truth is that no matter your faith in God, life is hard. No matter what, coming to church does not make us immune. You are not getting an immunity shot today that you will not know any troubles in your life. In fact, oftentimes it's because of faith you'll be led into troubles and difficult situations. If we only show you half the picture, what I always fear is that when something comes your way, and a diagnosis comes that you didn't expect, or something happens within your own family life, or something happens where you're let go from your job, suddenly along with everything else that's crashing, so does your faith. But here is what I hope we understand today, is that despite what Herod does, despite all that's done to stop the will and way of God, that no matter what, God's will and way will prevail. That God's will overcome all that evil sends our way. That despite what happens, we have to remain faithful and trusting and believing of what God can do. See, that's the story. That's the story that despite all that is, we can still rise above with faith and hope that God will provide, God will show. That's why the story I started with today about this young man, Tyler Trent, is so powerful. Because on January 1st of this year, Tyler made news for different reasons today. As I told you, Tyler was diagnosed with this cancer that was very aggressive. He was told he didn't have much of a chance of surviving, but he was able to rise above to enroll at Purdue University, rise above to get a full ride, full scholarship, and rise above. But unfortunately, right before starting this freshman year of college, the cancer came back. This time was in his pelvis. He had to undergo, once again, surgeries and treatment with chemotherapy. But yet he still started college on time. When he got to Purdue University, the school wanted to put him in a dorm room by himself so he could be isolated and have his own space. He said, no, I want to have a roommate. I want to experience college life. I want to be a part of what happens. And so they gave him a roommate. Also, Tyler Trent was a hardcore, die-hard football fan of the Purdue University Boilermakers. And right before their opening game in 2017, Tyler Trent camped out before the game to make sure he got tickets to get in. Now, I don't know if any college football fans here today, but let me just give you a little sidebar. Purdue football stinks, okay? Tyler was the only one out there with his roommate waiting for tickets. But the coach noticed him. The coach saw him and said, why are you here? It's camping all night to get tickets. They'll be playing tomorrow. Tyler said, no, I want to make sure I get the first one. But it built a bond then. And suddenly, not only the coach, but the entire football team got to know this young man named Tyler Trent. And they got to watch how he went through all of this difficulty. He went through chemotherapies. Later, the cancer came back to his spine. And the doctor said, sorry, we can't operate there. And eventually, this young man found himself bound to a wheelchair. But what's amazing about this young man, I wish to share today, is how, again, he continued to rise above. He will continue to rise above. And what was so touching to me is when I saw this, how he actually, going the wrong way here, he actually had a tattoo on his ankle. And I don't know if you can see it from there. But what he did is he took the pink ribbon for cancer and he turned it on its side. So like the early symbol for Christianity, like the fish. He put it on his ankle. He put the cancer ribbon, but turned on his side to demonstrate his faith. And underneath that ribbon then, he had these different designs made. And what the design basically says, what he tried to communicate to people, is that God is greater than my cancer. And Tyler Trent went on to found an organization of other young people who could provide service projects and do things in their community, uplift people. And Tyler Trent, he actually went on to receive all these awards. And when Purdue went to play Ohio State University, and the Ohio State University was ranked second in the nation, he was there to encourage the Boilermakers at the game. And if anybody follows college football, you'll know Ohio State lost one game this year, and guess who was two? Purdue Boilermakers, who were 20-point underdogs. That was Tyler Trent. And Tyler Trent wrote these words I believe with you today. He wrote these words that though I'm in hospice and have to wake up every morning knowing that the day might be my last day, I still have a choice to make that day the best it can be, to make most of whatever time I have in the ways I treat other people and what I share about my faith. He said, yet isn't that a choice we all have every day? After all, none of us knows the amount of days we have left. In some way, we're all in hospice to a certain degree. But not everybody is aware of their mortality and lives in a way of inspiring and lifting other people. I want to leave a legacy that motivates people to be advocates, to know that you can change the world if you continue to have faith and push forward. Because at the end of my life, I hope that there are generations behind me who also as well are motivated to do things in this world to make life better. If there are others who follow me, I die a happy man. And on January 1st, 2019, Tyler Trent breathed his last breath at 20 years old. But what's amazing today is how he was able to rise above cancer, to rise above death, to rise above all that came his way, to live in a way that made a difference. So may each and every one of us live our lives the same way, to rise above the times we live in, and to bring forth the love and grace of God for all to receive. In 2019, Journey of Faith, let's rise above.